All right, so it says we are live. Welcome, everyone. I'm here with an author who, in the recent, since 2018, when I started reading Chad Lutzke, he's quickly become a favorite. I've read like seven, have a lot of them here, and these books, they're all very. So every time you read a Chad Lutzke book, you're like, wow. So welcome, Chad. Thank you for coming to the channel. If you want to give yourself another introduction here.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I'm horrible with introductions. I write dark fiction, and they're all very short. I'm really seriously, I'm horrible with dark fiction. I've written several novellas, and I've written a couple books with other authors like John Bowden. I wrote a book with Tim Meyer. Wrote a book with or novelette with Terry M. West, and so I'm here hanging out with you.
Awesome. Before we get into some of my questions here, I was out here during you've co-authored, like as you just mentioned, a few books. How do you get how does that happen with you? Are you just friends with these guys and then you're just like, you know what, we should write a story together? Or do they approach you with a story, or do you approach them with a story?
I think the one with Terry and West, quite honestly, I can't even remember how that went down. That was a little while ago. But with John Bowden and I, we are really close, and we have a lot in common. And we both love each other's writing. We just hit it off. So it was kind of the thing with excuse me, Out Behind the Barn was, it was a short story of his that I liked, and just kept trying to encourage him to make it longer. I think it was like 3,500 words initially, and so when he kept getting it rejected, and he said he was ruining it by lengthening it, he just passed it my way and said, "Here, do something." And so I started to mess around with it, sent it back, and I was really respectful because I knew that it was kind of like his baby, and then sent it back and told him about some new characters I thought should be in there. And so we started working on it together, and we added like another 15,000 words or so. And so it wasn't like we asked each other, it was just, that's how it happened. And then with Tim Meyer, he asked me if I wanted to write a book with him. And I said, well, let's check it out. Because you can't always, even if you're really good friends with somebody, you can't always write with just everybody. I'm kind of an alpha and kind of a control freak when it comes to stuff. And so if I'm working with somebody who is also like that, it's probably not going to work, even if we're really good friends. John Bowden isn't like that. And Tim Meyer is not like that. So they're both very laid back. And so it made it easy. I've been asked to co-author stuff before, some of which we started and then maybe wasn't working out. Some of it I passed on. So I don't know. I think it just boils down to, two things. One, you want to have fun doing it, and you want to know that you want to believe that what you're going to create is going to be really worth reading, and something that you can be proud of together without stepping on each other's toes. So they all happen differently, I guess.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I noticed there's a story actually at the end of Out Behind the Barn right here. You actually story of how you guys to write this one. I think it was in the back of this book, and basically he sent you the story and you read it and suggested changes, and then I don't know, after a time you just ended up writing the changes yourself, and he liked it, and then you guys just sort of fixed the rest of it up and published it.
Yep.
Pretty interesting story.
Yeah, it was my idea to put the introduction in there because I wanted people to know that initially this was John. It's what I call a Bowden sandwich. The beginning was John, the end was John, and we worked on the so the skeleton was there, and still,
And you were the
yeah,
middle.
and still to this day, but working with him, and still to this day we get stuff that will say stuff like a review that might not even mention John, and that hurts my feelings. And I know it hurts. I know it bugs him. So, and I thought that might come about. So I was like, I'm going to write this introduction here because I know initially this was your idea. So this needs to be said. And some people are either not reading or not an introduction, but I think it's written in the back maybe. Some people aren't reading that, or they're forgetting. I don't know.
Well, I've being a reader for a long time and reader for a long time. I've skip introductions, or worse, they skip the prologue of the story, and that always baffles me. When I get a book and I see an introduction or an author's note, either at the beginning or the back, I'm going to gobble that shit up too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I noticed what I really originally wanted to use as the icebreaker. I wanted to talk about music a little bit because I noticed there's a lot of hardcore music in the same deep water as you, and there's also a lot of hardcore and some crossover thrash metal in. So I'm assuming that music played a big role in your own life.
Yeah. I'm huge into hardcore and punk rock and crossover. I mean, I listen to all kinds of music, but I from the age of like 14 till my mid 20s, that's pretty much all I listened to was hardcore and crossover and stuff and punk rock, and I still listen to it quite a lot. And I'm not a fan of I'm not a real big fan of like pop cultural references. They kind of bug me and take me out of the story, so I don't use them very much. And the ones I do use, I try to be uh, a little bit more underground and maybe mention, some of my favorite bands that, like for example, I'm a big fan of the Accused, and so whether it be lyrics or a mention of them, they're mentioned probably in 4 different books. Um, yeah, so I like to do that, but not to the extent where it pulls the reader out.
Yeah. I've seen pictures that you've posted on Twitter and probably Facebook too, of you playing guitar. Some of them look live, so I'm pretty sure you've been in bands yourself. How many bands have you been in?
I don't know. I would have to sit here and count. I mean, I haven't been in like dozens, but I've been in at least 6 or 7, I guess, something like that. I haven't been in a band in a really long time though. It's been, gosh,
Awesome.
yeah, a while.
Have you ever gotten to the point in any of these bands where you've released anything?
Just like demo stuff. Yeah, I recorded some music and demo stuff. I haven't really put any of it online or any of that stuff. I think there's some live footage of some shows on YouTube, a couple songs here and there, something like that, but not anything like super professional sounding. Just kind of like local demo type stuff, back in the tape trading days. And um, I think the last time I recorded something with a band and was like maybe late 90s. So it's been a while.
Awesome. Were these bands were they like the music that pretty much comes into your stories here? Were they like punk or hardcore bands?
Most of them, yeah, were punk or like crossover stuff. And then one of them was more like geez, like it had some funk in it and punk. And I don't really know how to describe it. We tried to mix it up a little bit. Um, but yeah, it had elements of funk and punk in it. And it's kind of a mixing bowl of different stuff that we were all into at the time.
Awesome. Now, since you listen to a lot of music, do you find yourself, are you able to listen to music while you write?
Not really. Not unless it's something that doesn't have lyrics and nothing too like groovy or anything. Nothing too melodic. I will start getting distracted, and I'm listening to all the instruments. I'm listening to the melody, and so yeah. Usually, if I do, it's like movie soundtracks, like John Carpenter, or I've got a list
Yeah.
of favorite stuff. The soundtrack for It Follows, but I don't normally do that. There's been a couple books that has been I was able to they were easier to write. Like The Same Deep Water, Slow Bird, and Skullface Boy were the three easiest books I've ever written. And so I think I listened to a lot of music when I was writing all three of those, or at least Deep Water and Skullface Boy. I listened to a lot of music while I was writing, but I normally can't really do that. I get too distracted.
Awesome. The reason why I asked that is because even your stories, even the ones that don't mention music at all, I find have a musical quality to them, because music is opening up your chest, brain, and being able to hear
Yeah.
songs very much are hypnotic for me anyway, because if the song grabs me, if it has the right hooks, a song can emotion. And your books, your books, exact same. My brain has the exact same reaction to your books as music does.
That's awesome.
So,
sorry, you're lagging a little bit here.
Did you always?
You're lagging here and
Did
there.
you always
So
want?
if I stall, it's because I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, there's definitely a lag here. So
yeah.
yeah, no problem. There's definitely a lag here. So anyone who's watching and there's like some freezing, especially going on in my end here, for some reason, StreamYard isn't liking me today. I think it might be my camera. But did you always want to be here?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Did you always want to be a writer?
No, not at all. When I was young, I wanted to be a musician, and or a special effect makeup artist. And so I did a lot of the effects, like on my friends' special effects, and I did a lot of making masks and stuff when I was a kid. And then once I moved out of my parents at 16, I started playing guitar. And then, but yeah, no, my first love was just, I wanted to basically be Gene Simmons. So really, I wanted to be a musician.
Awesome. How did you incorporate? When was the point that you said, "Okay, I think I need to write stories"?
It wasn't necessarily a necessity. Like, I'm not one of those writers who, oh, if I didn't have writing, I'd go nuts, or I have to be writing. It's not really like that for me. I like to create, and I guess I found the most satisfaction out of writing because there's a bigger audience for it, and I can share it with more people. Whereas like music, there's certain people who like like punk rock, and it's harder to, I don't know, get stuff out there. Not to say if I was recording music, it always had to be punk or anything, but and then with painting, there's so many people who don't appreciate a painting. I've got friends who aren't artists, and if they maybe see a new painting I did or a painting my wife did, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, right on." And I'm not that I need like a bunch of praise or anything, but I can just tell they have no idea that they have this mindset that art is just born somewhere, and then you look at it, they're not really comprehending that there's work that goes into that. And but writing is different.
Yeah.
And especially I think with the stuff that I write, I mean, I've got friends and family who think that I just write this slasher crap or something. I don't. Not to say slasher is crap. It's just that they 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 think, oh, you're writing horror, and I'm like, yeah, but not really. You would have to take a look at it, and then when the people do finally break the spine that aren't into horror, they realize, oh, okay, this is not what I thought it was. And so um I think it has a broader audience as a result. And I like, I mean, quite honestly, if I could somehow like be in a band and be touring, which is a weird thing to say considering the state of the world, and recording and stuff, I would I'd probably give that up over writing any day. But it just seems harder work, much harder work, and I'm getting older, and I don't know. I'm
Yeah. So when did writing, at about what, how long ago did you decide to start writing perhaps more regularly or more seriously?
I started writing a little bit in 95 or 96, I think, and then I quit for like 20 years. I just got busy with my kids, my family, World of Warcraft, uh, um, and band stuff too at the time, and I just didn't write for like 20 years, and work. And then around 2014, I decided I was gonna write a story. I had this idea I thought was cool, and I first place I submitted it to, they wanted it, and so it just kind of took off from there, and I just became more and more prolific. And then people finally started seeing the stuff, um, and that gave me more and more motivation. I mean, as long as I'm not one of these people who necessarily like just write for me, and that I would still write if no one read it. If nobody read any, I would not write at all. I'm just not. I mean, I would write. I've written, hundreds of songs that nobody's heard, but that's different for me. Whereas writing, if nobody was reading it, I don't think that I would. I don't think I would write at all.
Well, your stories, they are horrifying, but more like, the horrors of just existing. There's no real supernatural events necessarily in your main stories, and some of them are do trend into horror, but there's, again, it's still like life stuff. The horror community from on. I remember hearing on Facebook and I think Twitter, but I think it was mostly Facebook at the time. They were praising your stuff, like Wallflower, and some of the stuff you had out back then. So was it a surprise to you? Because I wouldn't, if I were to like categorize your work, I wouldn't necessarily give it a blanket tag of horror. I think it's honestly, it's more literary, general, contemporary, but with mixtures of horror in it. So was it a surprise the horror community really embraced you?
No, because that's my tribe by nature. I mean, I've been a monster kid since I was like 5 years old, and mm, I guess my idea of horror is goes out into that area. I mean, I can think of some dramas that to me are horrifying, and they are horror movies. Um, I mean, The Girl Next Door is a perfect example. There's nothing supernatural in there or anything, and yet, uh, I mean, it's on people's list of most disturbing, most horrifying books. And so, and I took after people like Joe Lansdale, who the horror community will always embrace his work. People who don't like cowboy stories are reading Joe Lansdale. People don't normally read crime are reading Joe Lansdale just because of his voice. And so that was my kind of goal from the get go, is I wanted to not be pigeonholed and to just have an audience that would hopefully follow me and have my own voice. And if I wanted to write something supernatural, that they would read it. And if I wanted to write something like a tragic romance kind of dark thing, that they would read it. And so that was important to me. So I think because I marketed it as such, like A Foster Homes and Flies was my first book, and to me it's to me it's a horror story, but kind of not really. I mean, it's if you have to put it into a box, then I guess it can go in there just because of the dark elements and stuff. But same with like Stephen King's The Body. It's not horror either, but that's one of the King's fans' favorite stories of his that he's written, and one of their favorite coming of age films. So no, it didn't really surprise me. It makes me happy. I wish that more people who didn't read horror would take a look at some other stuff, though.
They should, honestly, because it's like I said, it sort of breaks boundaries
Thank you.
to conventional horror stories, I think, anyway.
Hmm.
But was it your intention to write horror when you first?
Yeah, the first story I wrote was like a zombie story, which I was upset because I didn't want to write anything that I take pride in trying to come up with original ideas. And here I've got this zombie story, but I thought it was original enough. A kid is trying to hide his undead grandfather in the attic, and they're trying to do everything they can to keep it away from officials who have deemed that kind of thing against the law, and you can go to prison and stuff. So I thought it's probably been done before. I don't know, but I have never even read zombie fiction. I really don't have any interest in that, but I thought it was kind of neat. And then I wrote some other horror stories. So yeah, I think it was kind of my intention, but kind of not, because when I had the idea, I do recall thinking, okay, I'm going to write this one story and then I'm done with horror. I don't want to write horror. But then it just kind of kept coming out like that. I guess it's that like tug of war, and where I have, and maybe that's why I have like this dark drama type stuff mixed with elements of horror, because I'm trying to mash them up, or maybe it's an accident. I don't know, but I seem to have a hard time letting go of anything that's dark. Like The Same Deep Water is, you didn't have to be dark at all. But it's like I had to. I just felt comfortable doing that.
Yeah. Speaking of same deep water as you, you released a book recently on Friday, it was. It's Slow Burn on Riverside, and I just finished it a couple of days ago. It's a fantastic story. It's very connected to Sleep Water, which I have right here. Was it what was it that pulled you back to write about some of this? It's not all the same characters that are in this book are in Sloan, but the main character is, and Maurice. He's maybe one or two others. What was it that made you go back to that story and write about these characters and their lives? It's a bit of a, right?
What was the very last part you said?
It's a bit of it's a prequel, right?
Yeah, it's a prequel. It happened because when I was writing The Same Deep Water as You, that was the first book where I was writing it 100% for me, and I didn't care if anybody liked it, because it was an experiment, and it was basically a memoir told in kind of a fictional format. And 95% of The Same Deep Water is true. It's pretty much a memoir, with the exception of two of the extreme things that happened in the book. One person who dies is really dead, but that's not how they die. And then, so it was just a summer and winter in my life that I wanted to tell, because I have this deep connection with that Cure album that goes with that year. And I think about it all the time. And it wasn't even the best like year of my youth. It was just it's just so connected with that record, the Cure record, that I wanted to write it. And I wrote it in 10 days. And well, people probably won't like this, but I don't even care. This is for me, and I'm going to put it out. And if people are on board, and if they connect with it, then great. I hope they do. But and so I did, like I said, I did throw a couple little things in there to make it more of a cool story with some jaw-dropping moments. And then so I started thinking about it more, and I thought, well, maybe I should do this again, because that took no time at all to write. So I backed up another year in my life, and I wrote, but this one, Slow Burn, has a lot more fiction in it. There's a lot of the bigger, more extreme things in that did not happen, but the people are real. Every small incident is real. Relationships are real. But yeah, there are just some big elements that weren't. So
I Slope on our side offers some alternative paying your rent, I believe.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fiction.
Yeah. Okay. But you kind of hit the nail on the head with your answer to that question, because I was kind of getting to I kind of caught the feeling. I know you shouldn't really inflict beliefs or circumstances to an author's work, because it's not always, in fact, most of the time it's not. But I kind of felt that these two books, Same Deep Water as You and Slope, were rather, about your own life, not to the T or anything like that, but it felt like an expression of something that you personally experienced. And so I'm kind of glad that it was. It was, Same Deep Water as You was the first book I read by. Completely blew me away, because it reminded me a lot of my own childhood. And it was that, sometimes it takes a couple books to get in before you realize that you want to read this author's entire body of work. But with that one book, after I read that, I was like, man, I gotta keep reading this guy, because he packs a punch, like a serious punch. But despite all that, do you feel that it rears, because I've been a victim of this myself, do you think to assume that the writer is putting themselves 100% within their story? So if you have like a story full of bad things, like slasher fiction, people getting chopped up and it's obviously a mistake to assume that that the writer is some kind of depraved, psychopath writing out their fantasies.
Yeah. I think the only time I make that assumption is when I see something that feels like this paragraph here, or this incident is just something that the writer wanted to write because it's something that happened to them. It has nothing to do with his story. And because the whole book isn't like that, but all of a sudden this one little piece is, there are things that I'm like, I will bet you anything that really happened, that they drew that from, because of how specific it is. But no, yeah, I don't normally, I don't think that people who write slashers are want to be serial killers or anything like that. But I have been not accused, but asked many times before, after someone reads Wallflower, if they want to know about, have I tried heroin? Am I in recovery from that and stuff? And the answer is no. I am a recovering alcoholic. I don't drink. I haven't smoked weed or done anything in many, many years. But so as far as recovery, I know all about that kind of thing. I don't know what it feels like to recover from an opioid addiction. But just to be young and dumb and not be able to be a casual drinker or anything like that. So, and I mentioned something like that in I think in the gratitude page about being sober for so many years. And I kind of regret putting that in there because I'm wondering, because I started thinking that people are thinking that I was, a recovering heroin addict. But but I'm not. But I guess I should take that as a compliment, because they do also say, because it felt so real, or it seemed like you really know what you were talking about. And this also comes from heroin addicts and recovering heroin addicts. But that was a lot of research,
Yeah.
and it was, just a lot of visiting message boards and watching people do heroin on YouTube and nod off and tell their stories and stuff like that. So, and I've known a couple people who have,
It's funny that you it's funny that you mentioned that, because I just wallflower last night. I've heard the reason why it took me so long to get to it is because I've heard how grim it is, and I didn't want to be sad. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I was reading some, I think Goodreads. I think it was Goodreads reviews, and somebody was, a great book, a great a document on what it's like to be an addict, and it comes straight from Chad Lutzke's life. Now I'm just paraphrasing, but it seemed like this person seemed to know that you were a junkie at some point.
I think I read something like that,
but maybe
too,
they were
but
talking more
yeah,
about your alcoholism. Yeah.
no.
You know, you are instant, because itself is sort of like a metaphor for it's like to become addicted to anything, whether it's alcohol or heroin, as in the case of this book. How there's a bit of a draw, and then you get mixed, and you think, I'm not gonna become like that. There's no possible way I'll become like that. And then next thing you know, you're mixing and you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. The whether it be
But
heroin or say,
in sorry,
okay,
go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, when it comes to addiction, whether it be heroin or, gambling or drinking or porn or whatever, there's this draw, or there's this, it's all kind of the same. Some are easier to beat than others, and they all tear your life apart in different ways, but they all have, they have that initial pull or curiosity. And so if you know anything about any kind of addiction or have an addictive personality, like I do with, drinking, or even a video game, I mentioned World of Warcraft earlier. That was, I had a great time with that game for a while. It took a lot of my time, but yeah, so there's very similar behaviors with that kind of thing.
Yeah. And getting back to Slow Burn on Riverside, I admired Jax, the main character. He's sort of in the of all these circumstances, like, the drinking and doing drugs and experimenting, and he decides he's going to go sober.
Yeah.
I admired him for that, because that's a really hard thing to do, especially when you're surrounded by it. But I also really enjoyed that you came up with, like, the mystery drug. I can't remember what they called it. I want to call it the black tar, because it was like black and it came in like a vial.
Black honey. Yeah.
And the effects of it really, yeah, black honey, that's it. Yes. The effects of it pretty drastic. You experience it. It was almost like a bad, and it would last for hours, and then the ramifications, it would last. The effects of it would last on for like weeks afterwards, like serious depression and paranoia, and perhaps some schizophrenic type situations. I was wondering if there's ever a drug that you tried similarities to that.
Yeah, that is based on, with the exception of because I certainly don't want to give anything away, with the exception of kind of the more extreme effect that you know, of that, then yeah, it's based on um, something real that I had taken a few times. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to. Initially, I had what it was in the book, and I just felt really not good about having specifically what it was because I didn't want anybody to go, oh, really? That does that? I'm going to try that. And then I just didn't want anything to do with that. So I've made it
Yeah.
purely fictional. But yeah, up until, like I said, up until up until it gets really weird, then yes, there, as far as like depression and feeling kind of like, wow, what, what I'm different now for a while. Then yeah, that was based on true experiences.
Yeah, because I've been there too, and I've experienced very sad. And it does you sometimes when you have a bad experience, and so I kind of appreciated that. There's another thing I appreciate, and you kind of brushed upon it in your answer there, is that it has a kind of a weird ending. I don't want to get into it, but I just wanted to let you know that kind of has like the feel weird fiction, and I love weird fiction. So that
Right.
was really appreciated when I really loved it.
Great.
I kind of took the black honey. I kind of took that as, you know, because even though it's based on a real drug, itself doesn't exist in the real world. I kind of took that as like a metaphor for what drug abuse and alcohol abuse does to you anyway, because you
Yeah. Oh
start
yeah.
off thinking you're going to have a great time. The idea is always like it's going to be fun, right? And then you realize that it's not fun after a while.
Yeah. No, yeah. Exactly. Doing all that stuff is really a lot of fun when you're first doing it, and it just doesn't last. And then you're not doing it for fun. You're doing it to out of habit. You're doing out of like what you think is necessity, whatever that may be. But the yeah, and I know some people, unfortunately, that have been, that I've partied with through the years, and some are still doing the same stuff. Some are dead, some are in prison, and some are, um, pretty much just mentally not there anymore. They're just not. So yeah, you don't need a special kind of drug to get to that place. I mean, even somebody who's drinking to extremes, they can develop that sense of paranoia and stuff like that. Not everybody, would, but there have been people like that where they consume much of it, and their mind just goes into a different place, stays that way, and because they've lost who they are, that's just them anymore. They don't even remember their old self.
Yeah, that's very true. I know people like that as well. Um, but your stories, like the story we're talking, slow burn and same deep water. But I'm also thinking of foster homes and flies and stirring sheets. They really an emotional punch, as I've mentioned quite a few times talking to you here. I think that's the one thing I appreciate the most about your work is how much it affects me personally. But I was wondering, how, how are you able to connect to those emotions and then translate them on the page?
Um, I was just talking a little bit about this last week on my own podcast, Paleo Cheese Podcast. We were talking about empathy, and we were talking about serial killers and how serial killers lack empathy, um, and how they're so hard to understand because of that. And I was talking about how I consider myself kind of a hyper empath, where I really get disturbed by other people's grief. It can like really knock me out emotionally if I hear about, particularly if I hear about somebody who's going through a hard time based on like a freak accident or through an experience maybe that I have been through before, like a traumatic experience or loss. but mainly loss, like senseless loss, like suicide or a freak accident, whether it be a car accident or on the episode we were talking about someone choking to death. It's just, it seems like, wow, that didn't have to happen. And every time I hear about something like that, whether it be in the news or a friend of mine tells me, or I read something on Twitter or Facebook, it's been known to really like put me in a somber mood for days. Not to where I'm mopey and crying, but it's just it it's in the forefront of my mind, and I'm just picturing the scenario, and I'm picturing all of the people involved, witnesses, loved ones, and so I guess I don't like feeling like that, like, hyper empathetic, but I guess that it helps with the writing, and that's the only thing I can think of. It's not something, and I'm constantly, because I'm always trying to put myself in other people's shoes so that I can have an understanding, even if it's something that I don't agree with. Um, I'll give you an example, I guess, like this political climate that we just had this past year. I saw the right and the left just going at it. And I was constantly trying to see both sides of everything, instead of just having my mind made up. And that's kind of how I live my life when I'm going through stuff, because I know how easy it is to have a certain way of thinking and be settled in that way. And there's too many people who don't stop and think and take self inventory and just seriously ask themselves, is my opinion on this, is it really right? Like, can I learn like anything at all from this, even though on the outside, I shouldn't be agreeing with this. And so I do that when I'm writing. And if it's something that I've never been through, I guess I'm just able to try and put myself there. And I guess it's kind of a blessing and a curse, I guess.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean because no matter your political leanings, as to the way we treat each other, especially online,
Yeah.
it's become rather devastating to some. And so I've personally removed myself from it on Facebook because that's where I was. I've been I've seen some close friends get attacked quite viciously by the crowd,
Yeah.
pitchforks and the torches for something stupid, and it's not right. But if, I know what you're talking about being an empath. I'm rather empathic as well. And I've come across like pictures online and things that have like they personally disturb me, or when people are going through certain things, it's so hard to uh and yet the thing is we're on to your fiction because your fiction really deals with a lot of loss.
Yeah.
And so it's baffling to me why, because the real life things disturb the hell out of me, and I try to stay away from times unless I can't.
Yeah.
And also because I'm afraid of it happening to me too, right?
Yeah.
But and yet I read stuff you write, which is just gut wrenching. It's bad. The tables just a little bit. You were on Twitter recently, and you were talking about pantsing versus uh, uh, plotting, and you were quite passionate about answer. I was wondering if you'd want to discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I know the day you're talking about. Did I say something about if you don't have an end in sight, just keep pushing forward?
Something like that. And uh, a lot of the story that you had that endings,
Uh-huh.
you wouldn't have had you plotted them out. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I'll tell you exactly why I wrote that, because and I'll have to do this cryptically because it involves a slow burn. ending. Initially, Slow Burn I had kind of envisioned a different ending. And then I realized that the character Chris, I realized something totally different, and that I was going to change that. So that ending, that kind of like, I guess, jaw-dropping ending or whatever you want to call it, that wasn't there before. There was something completely different. And then I just thought, what if this? And I was kind of at a standstill too, because I hadn't written in a couple of days, or at least not much in a couple of days, because I knew I had an ending, but I wasn't really happy with it. And then I came up with a different ending, and and this has happened before. And so, yeah, I posted something on Twitter because I just felt so good about and the fact that that's happened to me before. And I know it happens to other people, and we have the tendency to like maybe stop writing or not even finish plotting something or whatever, because you don't have that perfect ending. But if you just keep pushing through that, it's eventually going to come. It might not come that day or later in that session or even that week, but something will come up out of nowhere. And that changed the entire book. And I thought, this is going to work, because if I didn't even see it coming, no one else is going to either. So,
yeah, you certainly surprised me with that.
Yeah, me too.
Honestly, I was like reading it. I was just like, whoa. Chad Lutzke just treaded on my territory. You kind of mentioned it a little bit about the thing might not come right away. It might come a little down the line. So that makes me think about your habits. So how often do you write? Is it like an everyday thing? You just write when it strikes like, I'm feeling good today, I'm not tired, so I'm going to write?
No, I try to write every day because there's this thing, like, most of my stuff is self-published, and I don't write long stuff, long things. I don't have like a big book deal or anything. But there is this race to like stay relevant, because people are moving on to the next thing. And so my goal is to be able to, I would love to be able to just not have to worry about, just be able to pay all my bills and live, at ease, just from writing. So, I try to remind myself of that and continue to write every day. Although it's like every time I release a book, it's like I fool myself into thinking I owe myself some kind of grace period of not having to write now, since I worked so hard on a book and released it. So I haven't really written in like a week. Yeah. So and I also blame a dumb video game I've been playing with my oldest son. I've been playing like every day with him, and it's just, but at the same time, it's like I'm lying to myself. I just finished a book, man. I've just been doing all this promotional stuff, and which does take a lot of writing, because when you're self-publishing, it's up to you to do all of the marketing and all that kind of crap, and of course, I did the cover, and I did a lot of my own covers. Well, I did Wallflower, Skullface Boy, the original Flies, Stirring the Sheets. With Stirring the Sheets, though, I used someone's painting. But I put it together, the wraparound and all that, and then of course I did the cover for Slow Burn. But so all of that stuff, takes time. So yeah, when a new book comes out, I definitely slow down. But other than that, I absolutely try to write every day, because if not, then I fall into this habit of just not doing it. One day turns into two, and then a week, and it's just not good. Not good for me.
I understand that. I also understand the pull. of video games, especially playing them with your son. my little guy, he's 7 years old,
Hmm.
and we just started playing games like Fortnite together. I'm more hooked on that game than he is
Yeah.
because I don't know. It's just fun, but I love playing with him because it's a form of bonding and it's something I don't want to miss. So
Yeah.
I totally get that.
I'm not
Um,
big. I'm not big on
to
video
everyone out
games.
there, I just
So once in a while, I find one that I really like,
yeah,
and then I kind of, I will go overboard on
yeah,
it.
same here. Honestly, I didn't play video games for probably 10 years before he discovered them,
Yeah.
and now I'm back into it, and it's just like, oh, it's so time consuming, but I
Hmm.
also appreciate it. Now, continue on. We're getting close to the end here, so if anyone out there has any questions for Chad, please just pop them in the down in the darkness there in the
I
chat,
I
and
I didn't.
and we'll try
I
to.
didn't even see the chat until now. So if it seems like I'm ignoring everyone, please forgive me. I did not even know anyone is even in here until just now. I'm looking at my other computer and I see people are in here. So thank you so much for
Yeah, yeah.
watching.
I've been watching them. Yeah, I've been watching them this whole time, and I've responded to a couple of them early on. But guys, have any questions? Please just post them in the chat, and we'll get to them.
Ross did ask
Now,
a
going
question.
back to okay,
He asked if Slow Burn on Riverside since it's a prequel to Same Deep Water. Do you have to read Same Deep Water? No, not at all. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to read Slow Burn first and then Deep Water, that works out perfect.
it does. Actually, I did that. I'm currently rereading Same Water as You, and they're very different books. They have the some, but they don't rely on each other. You can read them out of order, or you can start it and then read the Same Water as You. Definitely.
I think the most interesting
Is that
thing.
somehow I missed that question? I don't know. No, sorry. Go ahead.
I think the most interesting thing that people are finding about, as far as going back and then having a prequel, is seeing Maurice's origin and why
Mm-hmm.
he kind of did what he
For
did in
sure.
Deep Water.
The bookish report here. His name is Alex. He's a guy I like to chat with online. He asks, where should he start with your work?
Man, I don't know. It depends on kind of what you're into. My favorites of mine are not the same as the ones that I tell people to read first. Because I think there's more of a niche with the my favorites, like Skullface Boy is one of my favorites. Deep Water's one of my favorites. I guess maybe Foster Homes and Flies or Stirring the Sheets.
Yeah. Actually, Same Deep Water was my first, and it hooked me. So you could start there. But Chad's recommendations are also, very relevant. But they're fantastic works too.
Thank you.
I wanted to get back to the art here, as you mentioned earlier, you paint.
Yeah.
Online somewhere. It was a while ago, and it was a portrait of Kurt Cobain, and I was like absolutely
Yeah.
blown away with how realistic it is.
Well, thanks.
And you answered one of my questions because do you ever do your own artwork or your own covers? But you do, so that's awesome. But how long have you been painting? I mean, you have quite the skill.
The painting, I've always drawn my whole life, and then but I always wanted to paint and I couldn't, because I would always either draw with pen and ink or pencil, and I couldn't grasp the whole color um, and shading concept with painting. And then I think in the late 90s, I taught myself to paint, and then YouTube came about years later, and then I watched some videos on watercolor, which is probably it's my it's my go-to now if I do paint. I absolutely hate painting. I like the outcome, but I just don't like doing it all. It's not relaxing for me. It's very stressful. so I don't do it very much.
For a very fresh, it's great work that I've seen.
Thank you.
Do you have a medium that you prefer?
Yeah, watercolor, for sure. I used to do acrylic. I don't like oil. It's too messy. It takes too long to dry, and there's too much to do. Plus, I think I'm not very good at it. But yeah, watercolor. I think there's so many cool things that you can do with watercolor, and even like the so many cool like accidental mistakes, happy accidents or whatever that looks so cool with watercolor.
Yeah. Author, somebody you've co-written a recent book with, has asked a funny question here, and he asks, Chad, when will you cut your hair?
Who's that? Tim Mayer? Tim Meyer.
Hair, yeah.
I don't know, Tim. I guess when I get bored, I'll as I do, I'll cut it. When are you going to cut your hair?
Honestly, I think you should keep it. I think you should keep it on. It's become your staple. I used to have long hair too. It used to be quite as long as yours, but it'd be just past my shoulders.
Yeah,
But I got rid of it because
I grow it and then
it just became a temperature
I
issue
grow
for
it
me.
and then I cut it, and then I grow it and I cut it, and I've been doing that since I was like 16, and so but I don't think it's ever been this long. When I had dreads, it was longer, a little bit longer than it is now, but I don't think people realize how long it is, and it's pretty ridiculous, and I get tired of it sometimes.
I hated sleeping with long hair.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's always getting wrapped up, and if I'm trying to switch over, it's under my elbows and pulling it out.
Getting back to your writing here, we've brushed upon this. You primarily write, and I would say you're a master of writing novellas. You have a couple collections out as well, and I read one of them because I'm one of your Patreon members, and we got one for free on there, a collection, your most recent collection.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see writing longer works in the future, like I don't know, a novel that's like more than 200-300 pages long?
Yeah, I mean, I started one last fall that is going to be a novel. I don't know how many pages, but I think I'm. I mean, it's going to be the longest thing I've ever written. It's a historical fiction thing, but I plan on using that one to try and grab myself an agent. And if that doesn't happen, then I might submit it somewhere, and if that doesn't happen, I'll just put it out myself. But I'm kind of an impatient guy, and it's hard for me to sit around and wait, a year to 2 years before somebody puts it out and then takes half my money when I could just put it out myself. And unless of course they have a far bigger reach, and there's not a lot of small presses that have that can offer a lot, and usually now I only stick with small presses for like co-authoring projects. Like with Tim and I did Wormwood. I don't want to do the math. He doesn't want to do the math. So, we'll have somebody else do the math. So,
Yeah. We have a question here from Rob Shepard. He asks, Chad, do you have a book where you felt that the characters had become more than characters, felt almost real to you?
when I wrote Skullface Boy, the protagonist in that, Levi, I got really close to him, and then I cried when I wrote the end. I wrote the end, and I've done this with a handful of my books. I'm not even halfway through the book, and I write the last paragraph because I know where it's headed. And so I wrote the last paragraph when I was outside late at night. I was standing there thinking, and I wrote it in my head, and yeah, I teared up. And then when I came inside, I wrote it down, and I teared up again. So that was that that kid went through a lot in that book, and so to see him, to say goodbye to him, as far as like being done with the book, and just to see the ending that he has, it was weirdly emotional.
Very cool. So Tim Meyer,
Okay.
Tim Meyer, he said that he wants to do a dual cut with you. I'm sitting that he wants to do it live or
The
something.
collaboration cut.
Yeah, that's crazy. You're a bookmark.
Yeah,
I forget her name, but she made you into a bookmark, and I thought that
Carly.
was absolutely.
Yeah, Carly from A Stranger to You.
Yeah.
She's a wonderful artist, and yeah, that was pretty cool. It's pretty funny.
All right. So do we have any more questions from the chat? I'll just put that out there now because we're going to be wrapping this up pretty soon.
Yeah, when I said
I was just wondering,
you're the same deep water as you. I'm sorry, I was answering someone's question.
Yeah, I tend to do that too. I mentioned Slow Burn a lot. And
Yeah.
that's Slow Burn on Riverside, which is the book he just released on Friday.
Yeah.
And you can definitely start there, and then Same Deep Water as You, fantastic.
Mhm.
And they could go together, but they're not. They are both very separate. They're both fantastic. So you've been fairly prolific since I think you started publishing in 2014. Is that correct?
2014.
Yeah, you've been fairly prolific since then. So I suspect that you probably have plans, things that we can expect from you in the near future. Can you let us in on what you hope to be that we can look forward to?
I am doing another surprise coming of age thing, but this is body cosmic horror, and I think I'm going to. I don't know if that would be out this year. It depends. I was going to actually submit this one to a press in June, and so if that happens, you might not see it for a year. But if it doesn't happen, then you'll probably see it this year, because I'll probably not want it to submit it anywhere else, and I will put it out this year. And then as soon as I'm done with that, I think I'm going to write the second Neon Owl, and I plan on having at least one more of those out this year. I'm writing something with John Bowden right now called Trailer Park Coven. It's silly. It's fun stuff. He's busy right now. I'm busy, so I don't know when that will be out. We're actually writing two books. One is really this tear-jerker, heartbreaking, dark thing, and then the other one is just this kind of silly thing, the Trailer Park Coven. And then I think I'm going to write at least one, maybe two more in this whole Same Deep Water as You world. The next one will be a prequel to Slow Burn, and then the other one will be a prequel to that. So, and then
Cool.
I'll eventually put them out all together, and then you can read them in order. But yeah, it just happened that way.
You're writing a series backwards.
Yeah, on accident. Yep.
But you read series too. You mentioned this one here. The series is called The Neon Owl.
Yeah.
And it's book one here, when the shit hits the fan. I really enjoyed this. This is like a sort of like amateur fiction.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned that you plan on coming out with that one shortly.
Yeah, as soon as I'm done with this,
the second one, that is
coming of age. Yeah, I'm gonna write the second one, and that'll be out this year. My goal was to put at least
cool.
hopefully 6 books out this year. and Bloodletter would be one of them, which is the one I wrote under C.E. Lutzke.
The vampire.
Yeah, it's kind of a
Yeah.
sort of YA-ish vampire thing. Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. I read that one too. Yeah, it's different. Definitely different. You could tell you're going for maybe a different audience on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Cool though. Gregory Madhouse here asks a question. He asks, Chad, have you ever read the works of H.G. Wells? And if so, what's your...
No, I haven't. I mean, I've seen The Time Machine. And I think I used to have a vinyl record when I was a kid that had H.G. Wells stories or something on it. I can't remember. But no, I actually never have.
I've only read the main one, the one that everyone's familiar with, The War of the Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
For the time written, it's very bleak. It could have easily been written today, honestly. It's very good. I want to read the rest of his works when I can, honestly. It's great. Ooh. So I'm looking forward to everything you've got coming out. 6 books in 1 year.
Yeah, I hope so.
That's incredible. I said you were prolific, but I didn't. Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. So I'm looking forward to everything that you write. I think there's a lot of fans of yours here in the chat, and some aspiring fans. So I think I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having
joining
me, man.
me. It was an absolute blast talking to you, because I really enjoy reading your work.
Appreciate that, man.
It most of the time it affects me emotionally, and it's not to do that to me, and I think it's because you're able to connect a current that really, like, at least it exists on my part. It's hard for me to describe, but you connect into an emotion that I think is hard to connect to, and you do it brilliantly.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
One more question before I let you go.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned earlier that you were a monster kid. Yeah. So do you on just crazy and writing a big crazy monster story?
Do I have any interest in that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, part of me wants to write some really silly slasher, kind of like that would be funny and read the same way like the Neon Owl would, where it would be grotesque, but all of the characters would be like just, I don't know, it kind of just bizarre characters. And I think that would be fun. But to be honest, I would have to come up with something that I felt was really original. A lot of people put out, I like slasher movies, but they're not my go-to for when, oh man, I want to watch this really cool cerebral thing and just get my mind blown by it. They're like a snack. They're like, this is what I want to put on when I just want to turn my brain off. I know exactly what I'm getting, but because reading is such a time investment, it's not 90 minutes of something, it's hours of something. And so without boring somebody and just doing the same thing where there's a killer, he's killing people, you have character development, they die, someone saves the day, they figure it out, and then whatever, it's like, I can't expect people to put hours and hours into investing in reading something like that. But then again, there are people who do love that kind of stuff, and they would love to read the same thing they've already read before or seen before, and spend 4 or 5 hours reading it. Not to say that it takes 4 or 5 hours to read anything I've written, but
yeah,
My stuff is short. Thank you, Regina. Appreciate that.
You know what? Sometimes shorter is better, though, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes shorter is better because, especially when you're darker stuff, because I find that the things that affect us in that way that you write about in life, they often happen in short periods. It's the after effects that last a long period of time, but you don't need like 400, 500 pages to experiences like.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Thank you very much.
All right. I want to thank everyone.
Yeah.
I had an absolute blast talking to you. And I just want to invite you again on the show because I really enjoyed talking to you. I think there's a a familiarity within you that I find just talking to you. I think we could talk for hours probably.
All right, man. That's great. Yeah, I really appreciate
All
you
right.
having me on here.
Thanks everyone for showing up.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Thanks everyone. And look forward to more in the future. All right. So